Welcome to this edition of the Living Wisely Show. I'm Allegra Hall. I'm your host today, and my guest is none other than the fabulous Sarah Jakes. Now, Sarah has written a book that had me just staying up all night to read it. I could not put this book down. It's called Lost and Found. Right here, I want you to go out, just take my word for it, go out and get this book, and then you read along, stop the tape, come back, and hear what she has to say to go along with this book. So Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you were in the area. You know, I have bookmarked all kinds of, I was underlining, highlighting all through this book. I felt like your story was so transparent. It was so raw. It was, I don't know any other word than to say transparent. I mean, I could feel your heart in every page of this book.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what prompted you? What did you feel like I need to write this right now?
Well, I started a blog about 3 years ago, and during the course of the blog, people were telling me, you're so transparent, you're so transparent. And I didn't really feel transparent because all while I was writing, I was dealing with so many personal issues at home. So when I got approached by a publisher who kind of noticed that I had this growing blog audience, they asked me would I be interested in writing a memoir. And the first thing I thought was, I don't know if I have enough to put in a memoir. And then I kind of went through my life a little bit and I go, well, I might have a little something to put in there. And so I decided that Lost and Found would be my opportunity to really be transparent as my followers were calling me.
Well, I like that. I actually went on your website and you have a spot there called Dear Lost Me.
Yeah.
And I said, is she the new Dear Abby? Tell us about this.
Well, I read I wrote Lost and Found and turned it into the publisher. I never read over it. And so when I got the galley copies to kind of review for edits, I realized that I put a lot of my heart into it, a lot of my journey and experiences in it. And I had this question, you know, like, do you really want to be this exposed publicly, or do you want to take some of it out? And so I decided that I would keep it all in there, but I wrote this blog that I would just write a letter to my lost self. Like, knowing all that you know now, what would you have told that girl? And so it started off Dear Lost Me, and it was just a blog for me. And then the closer it got to the book coming out, I asked my followers if they would do the same thing, to write a letter to their lost selves. And so I was encouraged by their transparency. We had people talking about some of the things that they dealt with in their past. You know, some had been molested, some had experienced sexual assault and divorce and losing their children, losing their husband. We all had these wounds that we were still trying to heal. And so, but we had grown some and learned from it. And so we wrote these letters to our lost selves, and it kind of turned into a movement with the theme song and everything.
Oh, I didn't know you have a theme song too.
Yeah, she had actually sang it for me. And so one of my favorite parts of the course is I wrote a letter to the girl I used to be. You're much stronger than you believe. And so it's been an incredible experience to not one share my story, but to also see the power that others receive when they embrace who they were and acknowledge that they can't separate the two, that we are just as much our lost selves as we are our found selves.
You know, when I was looking through your information and just going online and watching some of your videos and reading the book, a friend of mine actually during this time wrote to me on Facebook, someone I hadn't talked to in literally 20 years.
Wow.
And what she said is, Allegra, I want to apologize for something I did to you in college. You know, college years, okay? And it was something was really hurtful. And she apologized to me. You know, she's now gone on, I mean, she's a very well educated lady and taken on a new life. And I wrote to her, I said, listen, I was hurt then. I said, but the woman I am today is not the girl I was then.
Yeah.
So when I'm reading your book, I said, oh my gosh, I could see how you just transitioned through so much, and it seems like it was in 6 months, but this was years.
Yeah, absolutely. I started the book when I grew up, when we moved from West Virginia to Dallas. I was 8 years old, and then the book kind of ends with me at 23, and I had made the decision to file for divorce and really wanted to take my life back. And it kind of ends there. And as a new chapter of my life now, as I get to sit and share with incredible people like yourself, I get to add more things for, you know, more chapters in my life.
It's an excellent book. Excellent book. I want to actually get a couple of copies. One for my nieces, my niece, and like just a couple for my younger sisters to hold on to until they get of age, and then they can read it. But I wanted to tell you, You say something in the book. You say you were not the ordinary church girl.
Yeah.
Now, see, I wasn't raised in church. I was actually raised a Muslim.
Okay.
Okay, until I came to the Lord at the age of 18 at college, and so I had a different life. So I was just thinking about how you grew up, you know, in the church and the church life. And what do you mean that you're not the ordinary girl?
Well, the first thing people want to know when you're a pastor's daughter is like, where do you fit? Are you a singer? Do you pray? Are you going to be on the dance team? And I knew that I didn't.
They want you to do all of that
they
and more.
want to know, and you're like 10 years old, and you're like, I don't even know what I want for lunch tomorrow,
Right,
you know? So
right.
I can't tell you that I want to take over, you know, whatever Bishop T.D. Jakes' ministry is at this point. And so I knew that I didn't fit because when all of my other friends kind of picked a group, picked a talent, I didn't have one. And so I was kind of content with being behind the scenes.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So I was thinking when I first came to the Lord, all the women at the church I was at wore skirts all the way down to their ankle, you know, covered to the neck, covered to the ankle, covered to the wrist.
Yeah.
And I thought that was holiness, you know, not realizing that it's, you know, obviously your relationship with the Lord and being clean from the inside out. Did you see a lot, you know, just growing up in church world, where you felt like, I've got to conform, I can't be myself, I've got to conform?
Yes, certainly. It is all that I felt, that this idea of Christianity and having a relationship with God had to look like whatever someone else's relationship with God looked like. And so anytime my relationship didn't mirror that, I felt like there was something wrong with me. And I wasn't one of those people who wanted to pretend. So I either had it or I didn't. And I didn't realize at that time that growing with God is a process, you know, and that everyone has an individual relationship with God. And I think it's a disservice to people to say that in order to be a Christian, you have to look like this, you have to act like that. Because the reality is that God is too creative to make us one version of a Christian. And we limit who people can be. And really, I think in the long run, do a disservice to church because there's so much creativity that our generation and other generations have to offer, but because it doesn't look like tradition, we throw it away. And then those people find a place in the world and we cry, you know? And so as I grew my platform and people started really gravitating towards me, I didn't want to do what had already been done before. I wanted to remain authentic and genuine in my process with God. And, you know, that doesn't mean that, you know, wearing the dresses down to here and your skirts that is wrong. It just means that it's not for me. You know, and it doesn't mean that it's won't be right for me. I could decide tomorrow, you know, like my relationship with God has convicted me to do this.
Absolutely.
But I think ultimately it's about conviction.
Well, you know, I didn't wear pants for 10 years, you know. I didn't even know what a pair of jeans was until I moved to D.C. and, you know, decided to put them on. I said, wait a minute, the ladies in church here can wear pants, so.
Yeah, I mean, the rules are so different. And I think that that's what's confusing, especially for millennials now, is that, you know, some people can wear pants and some people can, and you can wear jewelry here, but you can't there. And all of that is confusing to someone who wants a relationship with God because they want to know, how do I need to look in order to serve Him?
Good point.
And the reality is that there is no uniform look. And I think that that pushes people away more than their fear of shame. They want to be accepted. You don't want to walk into a church and feel like everyone's staring at you because you didn't wear the right shoes and, you know, you had on too much makeup or not enough makeup. And I don't know, it was too much emphasis on the show and not enough on a relationship.
You know, remember the times when we've had ladies come into church and people run up to you to throw the cloth.
Lap scarf.
And listen, I'm not mad about that. I get it, you know, modesty and all of that. I understand it. But sometimes you can push people out the door because they didn't mean any harm. All they know is they want to hear the word. They want to get set free. And if the first thing you do is throw something over them, maybe they're not going to get a chance. They might feel embarrassed or shamed.
Exactly. And I think that there's a loving way to do everything, that you don't have to shame someone because they didn't have on what we agreed with. You love on them, hug on them, allow them to receive the word of God. And then, you know, well, you know, what you wearing next week? You know, well, you know, and you can say things in a loving way. It's I don't believe that it's our job to pass out tickets and police the kingdom, you know. I think that there's a way that we can remain servants. Even when serving God's people.
I like that you said there's a way to do it in love.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I think if you go up to someone and you start telling them Jesus, Jesus, Jesus and beating them on the head, they're not going to feel accept it. Not saying that you accept everything that people do, but you know, there is a way to talk to people and show them love. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the reality is that they don't blame you when you're hitting them over the head. They blame Jesus.
That's true.
You know, and they don't think that there's a distinction between the two. And so we end up having people who walk around with a lot of church hurt, blaming God when it was really his people.
Well, you've been listening to the voice of Sarah Jakes right here on the Living Wisely Show. We'll be right back after this message. Thanks for tuning in to the Living Wisely Show. My name is R.A.W. I'm your host today, and I'm back with Sarah Jakes. She's written a great book, Lost and Found. We've already talked about this, but I want you right now to go on to sarahjakes.com. And I want you to look at this book. I want you to look at her webisodes, and you're just going to be encouraged by the great work that she's doing. So Sarah, thanks for staying with us for the second segment. I wanted to talk to you about something you wrote in the book. You talked about avoiding the tale of the pews, and you talked about the church court. What does this mean?
Well, when I was in children's church, you know, we used to play this game where you whispered something in someone's ear, and then by the time it made its way through the circle, the story was completely different. Right. And I thought it was just a game that we were playing in children's church. And then as I grew older and was in adult church, I realized that they're playing the same game, but this time they're facts, you know, and there's someone's real story. And by the time it gets to the other side of the sanctuary, the facts have been distorted. And so when I learned that, I had one main goal, and that was to stay out of the rumors or the tales of the pews, as I call it in Lost and Found. Because at the end of the day, whether it's true or false, it's someone's story, you know, and it can be quite painful to hear something that you're trying to work through, you know, displayed throughout the whole church. But that task would end up being quite difficult for me.
I was reading your story talking about being a teen mom, but what got me, or what really struck me, was when you went to your friends for some help, you know, for some advice, and to hear the teen logic. And it was just amazing to me, you know, that some were saying, oh, Sarah, you know, you don't have to keep this baby. But there was something already inside you at that tender age that said, no, I'm keeping this child.
I felt like I could do it. And I think that the person who told me that I didn't have to keep the baby had this misconception that if I gave the baby away via adoption or had an abortion, that I would just get off the hook. And the reality is that you don't just get off the hook, regardless of what your situation is, that it's not an easy one to make, and that you still carry a scar from that, whether you have the baby or not, that we all end up wounded. And so I just felt like, for me, the wound that I wanted to tend to involved me keeping my child, and recognize and respect that that's not the decision that a lot of other people have made, and but that no one just gets away with it.
I remember being in high school, and one of the girls in our class was pregnant, and so they were coming together for Teen Logic, and people were putting in money so she could go get this abortion. And years later, when I became an adult, I realized what an abortion was. You know, I had no idea, but in your mind as a kid, all you know is that this is a word, and this is the way out, you know. But it's just amazing to me that you had that presence of mind and the grace of God over you to say, Sarah, don't do that. You know, this little boy, Malachi, right, is going to be a great little kid, and I just really commend you for taking that step.
Thank you. Thank you. It wasn't a decision that I came to easily or one that I took lightly, but I did decide that I could do it. And I'm not sure why I felt that way even at that age. I wasn't like the one who grew up saying, I definitely want to be a mom. I didn't have like this slew of baby dolls, but there was just something in me that felt like, this is the decision that I've made. This is the situation that I'm in, and the responsible thing to do is, you know, to move forward from here with my son.
You know, my sister, I wasn't planning to say any of this, but my sister was pregnant at the same age.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I still remember my dad coming home, you know, and his attitude was completely different than your father's attitude. It was more like, what are we going to do? This is going to, you know, ruin her life. We're going to have to stop this right now, you know. And my mother and I were in the Lord at the time, and we're just like, no, we can't we can't do this. We knew it was going to be hard. But my sister was like, she didn't care what we had to say. She already made up in her mind this was her child and she was going to keep. And now he's 20 years old, you know, off to college, doing well. It was tough. It was difficult, and I don't want you to think my father was a bad man.
No,
he was a great father.
It's a devastating time. No one anticipates that their child is going to be pregnant at that age. And so even when I say my father was devastated, he was disappointed, and it was a challenge for him to love me through that. But I think we have to show both sides of it, because ultimately it is a difficult thing for a family to face as a whole. And so no, I would never judge your father for that.
When he sees this, he's going to say, Allegra, why did you tell that story? Why did you tell it? Because, you know, now he's my nephew is, you know, his pride and joy.
That's how Malachi is with his grandfather.
I was also reading a part where you said when you gave birth to Malachi, you realized that actually having a baby was not the same as having a baby doll. It's nothing like that.
Not at all.
So, you know, I bring that up because I see these reality shows, the teen mom shows, and I hear these stories about girls trying to get pregnant so they can get on the show and audition, and you're thinking, I don't think they realize this is not a little baby doll you can put away somewhere.
Yeah. But it's just a reflection of the mindset. It's when I got pregnant, my biggest fear was I was going to get in trouble, because I mean, up until that point, you don't have much to compare it to, because you know you missed a homework assignment, you stay at past your curfew or something, and that's trouble. And so you think that getting pregnant is trouble, and the reality is that it's life-changing, and there's no way to really prepare someone mentally for that at that age. And so it is a disservice to think that you can just get pregnant and get on a television show, and then after that, you know, you still have a life, and you know, parenting is lifelong. It's not over at 18. You know, it's a lifelong thing. But I think that it will help when you hear stories like my own, or stories like your sister's, to recognize that this isn't something that you face easily, but it comes with transparency.
And my sister went on, she has her master's degree. She's doing very well. Got to give a shout out to Rashida. You know?
Hey, Rashida.
Well, you know, there's just so much in your book. We could talk for 2 hours. There's just so much. But I wanted to move on quickly to toxic relationships. And just reading through your college years, I mean, you go in there 16 years old, 16, 17? Were you 17 at that time?
17.
And still, that's so young to get onto a college campus. And, you know, everyone is kind of moving on with their life. And here you are coming in, actually finishing high school early, right? Like a year early. And what was that like for you to make that transition, to go from the safety of your parents' home onto college campus?
Yeah, I thought I was ready. I was very focused on what I needed to do in order to really provide for Malachi and myself. And then I got there and realized how many distractions come with college. And it was the first time that I was on a campus and no one knew that I was T.D. Jake's daughter, and the freedom that comes with being able to have your own individuality. And it all became a bit overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. And so it gave me an opportunity to not be as focused as I should have been, and therefore I did end up in a toxic relationship, only because it was available and I wasn't as focused as I should have been.
Do you, you know, when you're reading your book, you look at the situation and you just know somebody was like, Sarah, don't do it, don't do it, girl.
I mean, I was like that. I think that we battle with that voice on the inside of our head, but I also think that there's a fear. Like, if this person accepts you and your insecurities and your brokenness, like, what if there is no one else? You know, what if this is Prince Charming? You know, and so you take on relationships, even though you know they're going to hurt you, out of fear that someone else won't accept you. And we end up, I wrote in the book that we fell in love with one another's brokenness. And in the end, broke each other more than we had to, had we had both been healthy and whole enough to really understand love and relationships at the time. And I see so many people who do the same thing, where you end up accepting something that you know is bad for you, because at the end of the day, it comforts you. And sometimes it's better to be comforted than to be challenged. And he was very comfortable for me at that time.
And, you know, if I could just add this, you just touched on something that made me want to run around this place. Sometimes when you're lonely, you know, you think there won't be somebody else. So I'm going to take this person because at least he knows me, at least he can understand me. loneliness is a very powerful emotion.
Is indeed, and can convince you to do a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise do. And I think that there's a piece also about falling in love with yourself, because when you really truly love yourself, you aren't worried about who else is going to love you. You find other things to love about yourself, and eventually you look up and someone else is, curious because you've fallen so in love with yourself that they want to fall in love with you too. But when you're afraid that that moment won't ever come, you look for people instead of looking for your purpose.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you've been listening to the voice yet again of Sarah Jakes. And listen, I don't want you to touch that dial. I want you to stay tuned, come back, because we're going to be talking more about toxic relationships, how to recognize them, how to get out of them, and when your girlfriends say, hey girl, cut that out, you'll listen this time. If you read Sarah's book, you will listen. Welcome back to the Living Wisely Show. I'm R.A.W, and I'm here with Sarah Jakes. I want you to go on sarahjakes.com right now so you can hear more about her book, great book, Lost and Found. So Sarah, we've been talking about toxic relationships, and I'm reading from your book, page 112. And you say, I had given myself to the role of Robert's wife, even though I would cry many more tears before I ever became one. Sure, I told myself he was a little rough around the edges, but who isn't, even if those edges were sharp?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's about knowingly getting into a situation that you know is going to hurt you. And I mean, I think that as a parent, I know that, you never know what you're going to face when you love someone. That life could come in and there could be these issues, and as you grow with someone, that they could end up hurting you in some way, but love finds a way. But I think at the core, love is supposed to make you better. And I don't think that you can love someone and knowingly make them worse. But at the time, I had no concept of that. But I knew for sure that the relationship wasn't making me better, but I felt like there was potential there. And I think it's a dangerous thing to fall in love with potential, because you never know if that potential will ever be realized. And so I found myself falling in love and marrying who I hoped he would become, and not actually who he was. And to that credit, and I write in the book, I owe him apology for that, because when you say you love someone, you're supposed to love who they are in that moment, and not who you think that they will eventually become. But it's, all a learning lesson.
Your book made me laugh out loud. I loved your sister in the book. Okay?
She's hilarious in real life too.
Okay. Yeah, she was great, and I really want to meet your best friend,
Stacy.
Stacy.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody needs a Stacy in their life. Oh my gosh, she is so wonderful. The other thing that hit me was, jumping back for 2 seconds, the love that your brother showed you.
Yeah, Jermaine.
And how you said you woke up, after you had told your family what was going on in your life, and you woke up and he was still there with his hand on your back, you know. And it just touched me. You had such great people around you.
I did, and I think I took them for granted in a way that I thought that love was universally like that. I didn't realize, because that was all I had been surrounded by, that's not what people's definition of love is everywhere. And so it wasn't really until I was in my relationship with Robert that I realized that love isn't like that everywhere. It's not always as present. It's not always as beautiful and supportive and encouraging, and that sometimes people can say they love you and not show up. And that doesn't mean that their definition is wrong. It just means that it's different from yours. And so I took them for granted, but my marriage really taught me to show those types of relationships more respect, and to really value and cherish them more than I think I would have had I not gone through my situation.
I was laughing at one part of the book, and also almost crying, when your girlfriend told you, pick up your bag because you dropped your bag. Girl, you ready to take those earrings off and fight for your man?
I was.
I laughed because I said, I would have done the same thing. I had an experience, as many women have had, and don't want to tell the truth about.
Don't want to tell the truth about.
Girl, you know that old song, I bust the windows out your car?
Yes. Sometimes you just get sick of it.
Oh, I had walked past this car a couple times, and I thought, I'm going to, the police are going to
tires
kill me.
or something.
I wanted to do something. But what I also found interesting is that we get more angry with the woman.
Oh, yeah.
Why do we want to fight each other, rather than tell him a few words and hit the bricks.
Yeah, because we don't want it. At the end of the day, that fear of abandonment is still there. And so we think that we can beat the woman up enough to make her leave, and then that we'll deal with him later. But I write in the book often that I was torn between believing the other woman or believing him, and always sided with him. But the reality is that I really wasn't torn, that I could have chosen myself, and that I put myself in that mindset and then imprisoned myself in a relationship that wasn't good for me. And my strength really came when I realized that you don't have to be imprisoned in this. You don't have to settle. You can be more comfortable than you are. You just have to be willing to humble yourself and tell people that you were wrong, and to pay the consequences for whatever that may mean.
When you said those exact words, you know, I was wrong, do you think that your friends and family went,
indeed they did. Indeed they did. I think that they were waiting for me to realize what they had seen all along.
Okay.
But they never forced me, because I think they wanted me to make the decision on my own, so that when I walked away, I didn't blame them for the hurt. I didn't blame them for the tears and the pain. But so they had to watch idly while I earned my scars. But to see them being used for a purpose now, I think gives them a lot of compassion.
It's so good. I can't say enough. This book is just so good. I was thinking about one part that I wanted to make sure we got to, which is forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know, your situation, I once had a girl like confront me in the church. That's all I'm going to say. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm saved. But something came back to, I was thinking I'm taking my earrings off. And then I heard my mother's voice saying, you're always a lady.
Yeah.
You know, you're always a lady. And at that point, I threw my little scarf on and walked on out and said, you know, like you said, I'll deal with him later.
Yeah.
But we had to let him go. That was bad. You know? That was bad. But good came right after. In fact, great came right after that. I couldn't see great because I was too busy looking at this toxic thing, trying to save it.
Great does definitely come.
Oh yes, absolutely. But you say you felt like in some points you were trying to earn forgiveness.
Yeah, I did. I felt like, especially after my pregnancy, and then, you know, I dropped out of college. I made all of these detours in my life, ended up in a bad relationship, took my family through that entire process, and I felt like, man, if I could just make this up to them, then they could be proud of me. If I could just make this up to them, then I could be proud of myself. And the reality is that they had forgiven me, and they were just waiting on me to forgive myself. And because I projected those thoughts onto them, I made all of these different decisions thinking that I could earn their forgiveness, when the forgiveness was always there. I just never fully stepped into it. And so my challenge then became, especially as I made the decision to divorce, to realize that forgiveness is ever present, that grace is ever present, and that shame will be only if I allow it. And that at the end of the day, I had to choose. I couldn't say that I was forgiven and still be ashamed. And if you truly are forgiven, if we truly do believe that Christ has forgiven us, that God has forgiven us for our past and our indiscretions, then we must walk and live in that forgiveness. And so I've made that my mission, to really live a forgiven life, and to always be humble in everything I do.
And when you say that you're living a forgiving life, forgiving others, forgiving yourself.
Absolutely. Being more compassionate towards people, not judging them based on their circumstances. Just because yours was different than mine doesn't allow me the room to be judgmental. And because I realize that we do a really good job of convicting other people. But if we could be as forgiving, that maybe someone would take a chance on themselves. And so I know that there's a role in the body of Christ for everyone, and I certainly don't want to show any slight to any of those rules, but I do believe that my role is to show God's love, and I try to do that with people, whether they're lost or found. You know, depending on what area of your life you're in, I may be the only glimpse of God's love that you see. And if God brings a soul to me, and I have this one opportunity to tell them about God, do I want to tell them about their shame and their conviction, or do I want to show them grace and forgiveness and hope that that is a seed that then blossoms into their life? And so I choose to show love.
And do you feel that people respond to you differently now? You know, you say in the book you just wanted to be known as simply Sarah. And do you feel like people, you know, feel like they can touch you and talk to you and more connected?
I do. And I spent a very long time running from this T.D. Jakes' daughter thing that I wanted to be my own person. And now that I'm 25, I realize like you can't separate yourself from being who your father is.
Yes.
And there is a mandate that comes with that and a grace that comes with that. And that it is who you are, essentially. So you can't really separate yourself from that, but you can be authentically yourself still. You don't have to be who the world thinks that you should be. And so, yeah, people are very receptive to me. I have a lot of friends in my head from my social media and quite a sisterhood that we have formed and bonded over the fact that we all have a past, but that we are unwilling to let our past define us.
Well, Sarah, in this last maybe 20 seconds, can you just look into this camera and what would you say to someone who is saying, how do I connect to sarahjakes.com? Why do I need to read this book?
My prayer in writing Lost and Found is that someone will read the book and see a piece of themselves. And if you identify with any part of my story, any part of my insecurities, my shame, the guilt that I carry from my past, then you'll also identify with God's grace and the ability to overcome from the things that we thought would break us. And so as you connect with me, whether it's through the book or on my website or on my site, I invite you to grow with me, to be a part of my journey, to not just be a spectator, but to actually join in and do the work so that we can heal and be used to create a nation of people who believe that His strength is made perfect in our weakness.
Well said. Sarah, thanks for being a great guest.
Thank you.